Stay with us, Dmitry. We have further news coming out of the region where Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has called out Lithuania's decision to close border crossings with his country, calling it a crazy scam. Speaking in Moscow, Lukashenko accused the Western nations of waging a hybrid war against Belarus and Russia, saying Europe was entering a new era of barbed wire and closed skies. Lithuania moved to shut most border crossings after a series of balloons allegedly launched from Belarus crossed into its airspace, disrupting flights and raising security concerns. Lukashenko dismissed the accusations, saying Belarus had no interest in escalating tensions, and criticized Europe and the US for what he called absurd provocations against Minsk and Moscow. Okay, we are now once again joined by Dmitry Simes on this issue. Dmitry, of course, Belarus and Moscow remain close allies, and Lukashenko, Belarus's leader, accuses the West of a barbed wire hybrid war. What does that mean, and is Belarus preparing for confrontation here?
Well, Belarus most certainly is not preparing for confrontation. It's a nation with a population just over 9 million, which is less than a lot of major cities like, you can look at the major cities in China, and Belarus is less than that. Belarus doesn't want a conflict with anyone. It's a small country that has, throughout its history, tried to more or less maintain good relations with everyone. Including the West, by the way. But what has happened is that you've seen the NATO countries, and especially Poland and Lithuania, adopt the position that they want to orchestrate regime change in Belarus. And, for your viewers, I think it's important to go back to 2020, when there were presidential elections in Belarus. Lukashenko won those elections, and in response, what you ended up seeing is that Poland and Lithuania began funding a massive regime change effort in Belarus. You saw that a lot of propaganda networks were set up not only on the territory of Poland and Lithuania, but they were financed by Polish and Lithuanian taxpayer dollars. And a lot of, radical opposition politicians were also being financed by Poland and Lithuania. Since then, you've seen a lot of Polish and Lithuanian politicians make provocative statements about how the Lukashenko government needs to be overthrown, including by force if necessary. You've seen, provocative mobilization of forces near the border with Belarus. And accordingly, Belarus is on its guard because, again, it's a small country. And so Belarus has responded by strengthening its military cooperation with Russia to make sure that, if God forbid the Poles or the Lithuanians were to attack, that Belarus would be able to defend its sovereignty.
Yes, and Dmitry, finally, how closely is Belarus linked to Moscow now?
Well, Belarus and Russia are part of what is called a common union state. So both Russia and Belarus have sovereign foreign policies, but the two countries are trying to pursue economic integration, akin to something along the European Union, but on a smaller scale. Again, this is not really an aggressive development. This is a, boosting people-to-people ties, boosting cultural, language, economic integration. And obviously, Belarus and Russia are close military allies because Belarus is a small country, and it helps for them to cooperate with Russia and to have that support. But I want to emphasize that, there's this sort of myth that Belarus is somehow Russia's puppet or something like that. That most definitely is not the case, because when you look at the foreign policy of Belarus, their strengthening cooperation across the board. They're strengthening cooperation with India, by the way. Belarus has made, great strides in strengthening cooperation with India. They have well-established ties with China. They're working more and more with African countries. They're working with Iran, Turkey, you name it. Belarus is a pretty, peace-loving, friendly country, so it has a lot of great relationships across the world. The only people it really doesn't get along with, again, are some of these more aggressive Eastern European NATO states that have their own sort of history of politically occupying Belarus, because I want to remind your viewers that the Poles invaded Belarus for over several hundred years, and Belarus was forcibly colonized by the Poles. So there is some history there. But even when you look at President Trump, even he has made it clear that he wants to have a normal relationship with Belarus. So when we see some of these hardline statements coming from Poland and Lithuania, I think it is important to keep in mind that they're global outliers, and that for the most part, Belarus has great relations with everyone.
Yes, Dimitri Simes Jr., thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's been a pleasure to have you. We now move on for our final story of the hour, where Jamaica is bracing for what the World Meteorological Organization calls a catastrophic situation as Hurricane Melissa makes landfall. The storm is bringing gusts of more than 300 kilometers an hour, massive storm surges up to 4 meters, and rainfall that could exceed 70 centimeters, twice a typical rainy season. Flash floods and landslides are expected to strike hard. The International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies warn as many as 1.5 million people in Jamaica could be directly affected. More than 800 shelters have been set up as evacuees flee low-lying areas. Officials warn roofs will be tested, floodwaters will rise, and isolation will become a harsh reality. As the Category 5 storm sweeps in, this is likely to be the worst storm Jamaica has faced this century. Authorities urge everyone in vulnerable areas to seek shelter, move to higher ground, and stay indoors until the all clear. This is what Anne Claire has said.
In addition to the rain and to the destructive wind, you will have storm surge that is expected as well on the southern coast of Jamaica, with 3 to 4 meters high, in addition to destructive waves. So it's a catastrophic situation that is expected to be in Jamaica. It's a massive hurricanes heading towards Jamaica, and it would have a direct impact in the coming hours into Jamaica. So the winds for Jamaica is expected to reach about 280 kilometers per hour, with gusts picking up to 350 kilometers per hour.
And that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep